Welcome everyone to episode 2 of the Ethnically podcast. And this is the podcast where we're talking to ethnic minorities in the world and understanding their social impact and their journeys to success. Today, I'm joined by Gleston Mendonca, and he is an upcoming entrepreneur who has had his success in network marketing, where he's made his first money and was trained by Bob Proctor's consultants. He is now a certified business consultant in the Proctor Gallagher Institute and is having his first event in Florida in October. And he's going to be doing way more events across the world. He's got one in Canada, he's got one in the UK. He's going global, and he's an upcoming entrepreneur that I think in 5-10 years time, I think I'm going to big you up here. I think the whole world will be hearing your name in that period of time. Yeah, hi, Gleston, how you doing?
I'm good as always, man. How's it going?
Yeah, really excited to talk to you and just hear more from your story. And I'm sure our listeners will be really interested to learn more about yourself. So just gonna get started, and I guess the first main question: what's your story today from when your story was starting to be formed? So, what has been the things that have led you to where you are today? And yeah, just share with everyone your background.
Good question. It was more sheer determination. So that was the first thing. It was the understanding. So initially, when I first started business, a lot of entrepreneurs, big entrepreneurs, have a whole background in selling clothes and stuff. That I never really was a part of that stuff. So in school, I was more of the let's just have fun in school. That's me. But then when it came to college, I realized that I need to take my life a bit more seriously. Over college, I was like, okay, cool. Let me just finish my A levels. But then you could say I woke up. And I was watching a video on YouTube, and it was said that no one's coming to save you. It's you, and you're the only one stopping you from where you want to get to. And instantly, my whole world just shifted completely. And it was like, whoa, I'm the only one stopping myself from getting where I want to get to. So then during my A levels, so I never took A levels seriously, I'll be so honest. So with
Really?
me, it was so it was I was in initially learn copywriting, but this is one thing I learned is that I never took action. I never made any money because I didn't take action. I was one of those people who love to take as much information, love to learn. However, I never really liked taking the action, so I never did it. So then when I finished my A levels, the first thing I knew was your network, your network. That was the only thing I knew. So with that being said, I just went to a bunch of networking events. This is where the sheer determination came from. It was just my original purpose was just to retire. That was my initial goal. So later on, like I found out that wasn't a purpose, that was just a goal. But then with that being said, I had a girlfriend at the time as well. That was an interesting one going through the entrepreneurial life. But then I had a full-time job as a barista, but then in between I was going to as many networking events as possible. And I don't know how I came across them. I'll explain how, which was Instagram ads, if that makes sense. If you watch business content a lot, they push out a lot of these events on. And so I had a good friend of mine. So I met her at networking event. She was like, hey, there's a network. And so I went to about 30 different networking events over 3 months, having a full-time job. So 3 to 4 networking events a week. And so it was just that determination to find that person. And really what I was looking for was a mentor. I knew that they would take me from where I was to where I am or where I want to be. And they would have had made the mistakes that I wouldn't need to make, if that makes sense. So that was my pursuit. My pursuit was to find a mentor because none of my family is business oriented. None of my friends were business oriented either because neither was my girlfriend. So it was a whole, how do I say it? I had to refresh my friends in that process, if that makes sense. I had to go alone in that process. No one understood where I wanted to go. And I just had to keep striving past all the doubt, all the negativity just to find a mentor. So when I found a mentor, so she very lucky enough, and actually, I won't say luck, I'll say very fortunate enough, I met an amazing mentor. Her name's Caroline, and she was actually mentored by Bob Proctor for multiple years. And so, with that being said, I knew from her countenance and the way she spoke, I knew that I wanted her to be my mentor. So at the time, I went through property as well. So it was I went through a whole journey. So it was networking. And I think anyone who starts business gets into property first because it's the most mainstream out there. It's just the most out there, if that makes sense. So I was like, let me just go with this mentor. 350 was a lot to me actually, but
Yeah.
I perceived it as little. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go for this one because this one serves you much better, and it supplies most of my needs. Because the thing that I wanted to do, or the skills I wanted to have, was to have skills and the mindset that can apply to any business industry that I wanted, any industry that I wanted. So I knew that working with her was what I was gonna get. So I found a mentor, and then I went through an introductory program. So it was that program that took me to greater height. So the main skills I learned was networking, sales, community building, and leadership. And then he taught me the mindset stuff as well. The mindset's most important. As most entrepreneurs probably know, business is 95% mindset, 5% strategy. That's actually what it is. And it's more of the internal work than the external, because when you understand that your outer world is a picture image of your inner world, you realize you need to change that inner programming for you to have a different result in your life. So working with her for the first 6 weeks, it was a 3-month program, but within the first 6 weeks, I was in a network marketing company, and working with her, she shot me up to the top rank of the company. And then after that, I decided to move on to a different business. So I started up a trading business myself as well. And in that process, I was able to regain that income within a very short amount of time again. So I've consistently done those over the period of time. But now this is where purpose came along for me. I wasn't completely fulfilled. Yes, I was making the money, but I didn't feel like I'm fulfilling much. Yes, I was helping people make money, but that wasn't the way I wanted it to be, because trading, I wasn't a person to look at charts all day. I'm a people's person. I love to talk to people. That's when I closed that company down and switched to as a business consultant, where I work with individuals along with companies. So that's my story right now.
Damn, that is, and it's inspiring in so many ways. But I think, in my perspective, and I'm sure a lot of listeners would probably feel the same, is that you've been able to do it with a mindset that you've developed. It's not just one day you had this mindset. You've had to iterate it and grow it and change it and learn different things and unlearn different things as well in that period of time, which I think is it's just a testament to you as a person, but you as an entrepreneur and what you want to do in the world. So that's amazing, and it's really interesting to hear. And
Thank you.
as I switched the focus from an amazing sort of business career that you've already had already, going deeper into your story, deeper into what drives you, what were the factors, what were the things. Next question would be, this is obviously a podcast focusing on ethnic minority individuals, and I would love to learn more about your family, your heritage, and that sort of influence, and how it's made you the person you are today.
So originally, when I was younger, so my parents actually immigrated to London. So they went from India to London, and that was by sheer luck and coincidence. And it's funny because my parents met at someone else's wedding, and it was funny because my mom works as a nanny. So both my parents, my dad actually works in Tesco, my mom works as a nanny. So she was a nanny since she was 16, actually. So she had the mindset, but she was a bit unconscious to this. This with my mom personally. So my mom knew about education, but she got to this place where she is today, where we have a house, where she has a good job, and she didn't go through this whole educational system. With that being said, when I was born, I was actually in India for a year because my parents couldn't afford the lifestyle to have a child in London. So I lived with my grandma for a bit. That's when I learnt my language. We call it Konkani. So it's very, very niche within the
Yeah.
south of India. But then with that being said, so when I came back to London, it was a lot more of the teachings of my mom. None of my parents told me anything about business, but the mindset that they instilled in me was discipline and hard work, if that makes sense. And
Mm.
so it was, if you want to go after something, keep on going, if that makes sense. Don't stop. And my mom has a very entrepreneurial mindset in the sense that there's some people maybe start like, okay, cool. So with that being said, when I was younger, my parents couldn't afford anything. I wanted to do karate when I was younger as well, but we didn't have a car or anything, so we couldn't really afford it. But every Asian kid wants to start doing fighting. But then later on, it's the belief system was just discipline and hard work. That's what was instilled in me. However, there were some money mindsets that did not serve me. Stuff like you had to work hard for your money. That's the first thing. Everyone's heard of work smart, not hard. But they were working hard. They never understood how to work smart, if that makes sense. Another thing was, funny enough, this was not recently, but this was when I was first starting out within business. This was about 6 months ago. Remember my dad saying this, like, why are you taking so much risk? So it was more the principle of how that affected me. So there's two ways this happens on a psychological level, is that you see this reality for people and you're like, this is my reality. I'm just gonna go down this path. Or the other side is you see this reality and you completely reject it. And so clearly for me, I've rejected it completely because I was like, no, I'm not gonna let that define me. Just because my parents were amazing and are amazing and they've done amazing things. However, I don't want their life. I want better. So that meant that I had to do something that they haven't done, which is get into
Mhm.
business, if that makes sense. So it was that ideology. And of course, education plays a big factor. Even now, from time to time, my mom's, you're going to go to university, right? And I'm like, no. So it becomes that dynamic of there's other ways to make money. And obviously, with this older generation, they believe that back in the day, education and a college and a university degree could pay for a nice paying job, which could pay off your mortgage, get a house, and live comfortably with your family. However, as people know, inflation's through the roof. There's a massive story behind it as well, which you might get into later. But it's that principle of massive inflation, and now jobs. People need minimum 2, 3 streams of income to even supply the lifestyle that they would like to have. And so it becomes a premise of you can't just work a 9 to 5. So that's where I rejected that whole mindset and you could say paradox within. That was my mindset according to that.
It's really interesting because I think it's good that I think we all know like our parents have a really positive impact and they're the things that they do that you're like, oh yeah, like this is something I'm going to take forward with my life. But it's actually really interesting because I think within that Asian, I would say Asian mindset because I can speak as I'm an Asian as well.
100%.
But like a mindset of, just to clarify, mindset of having to survive and yeah, survival, just trying to get in and do what is needed rather than and try and get those standards that can sustain you rather than make you thrive. And I think that is something that I really got from your answer just there, just because it is something that is built in within the South Asian community in particular. Just on what you said around like the psychology and the mindset and sort of those beliefs being instilled within you. I guess my sort of next question would be how once you had realized you wanted to make those changes, not just do what your parents did, but respect what they did, but build on them and build your own legacy. What were the key differences? What were the things that you were like, okay, I need to change this habit. I need to change this discipline. I need to do this to make myself. What were the things that the key sort of 2 or 3 things you would say?
Okay. Very good question. What the thing is, I done so Bob Proctor calls it this is someone who's called an unconscious competent. And it's someone who does the right things without knowing what they did, if that makes sense. And this is the beauty of me having a mentor is because I done exactly what she told me to do, and I just had done it without even realizing. But looking back at it, I can tell you what some things I changed. One thing I had, so we call these paradigms. Paradigms are habits, basically. That's what Bob said. And so, in other words, one of my biggest paradigms were distraction. I had a very big distraction paradigm. And what that meant is I couldn't focus on one task and stick to it for multiple things. For example, when I started business, before I met my mentor, when I was just networking, I had my whole laptop screen full of tab. I was intrigued about the options rather than sticking to one and making it fruitful. So one of my biggest habits was, or like biggest paradigms were, it was distraction. Another one was
Mhm.
order. Order was a very big one. And this is how I see it. When you're in business and you're competing with other people, business is not a solo sport. That's the first thing. You have to do it with a team because everyone else does it with a team. But it's about efficiency as well. And you can't be efficient if you don't have order. If you're just free flowing, this is what I say. You can't be floating through life. It's as simple as that. When you don't have no purpose, when you don't have an aim, when you don't have a target, you're flowing through life. And that was one of the big things as well. When you don't have order, you are more susceptible to hardships coming your way. Oh wait, okay, cool. This is just coming. I need to deal with this. Okay, that's coming. I need to deal with it. And you don't really do what you're meant to do for the day, if that makes sense. So that was another one. And probably my third and most important one. Let me think about this. It was that's a very tough one. What was my last one? There's so many because everyone has multiple hundreds of paradigms, if that makes sense. But I think it goes back to attachment as well. And attachment is a big one because this one was a very big one for me, and I'll tell you how. So It was attachment to a specific person or reality. And obviously, I'm Christian on paper. And so it's one of the sins of attachment. And it's the understanding that you're attaching yourself to something that doesn't need to be attached to. So when it was, I first started, so I had this mentor, but this mentor was the most abnormal thing in my life. The mindset behind it was the most abnormal thing in my life, which was necessary. Because if you want to get a different outcome, you have to think differently. So I was having attachment towards other small things around myself. For example, my parents, my girlfriend, my previous ideologies, my previous philosophies. But then I had to understand that I had to let those things go in order to grow, or else I wouldn't have been able to. That makes sense. And then that's when I gained an attachment to business, had a love for business. But this is where I fell wrong. This is where I want to give some of your viewers value. There's a difference between making business your life and your lifestyle. And so within the yes, I made like pretty good money for an 18-year-old. And the one thing that I understood was, okay, cool, I'm making good money. However, it became my lifestyle, my life. Business became my life. It's the only thing I breathed, like ate everything, listened to. It was just that. And that's not a bad thing when you're starting out, but you need to gain the value, you need to gain the knowledge to be able to thrive in that environment. However, when you realize you have other aspects to your life with family, your girlfriend, your social life, you start to realize that you can't just be focused on business. And I struggled, yeah. And this is what's gonna feel. You're gonna feel frustrated. You're gonna feel burnt out as well. And so the last thing was, it was that I was just basically in a 9 to 5 for myself, if that makes sense. And that's the difference between someone who's self-employed and someone who's a business owner, if that makes sense. So I was saying that my biggest paradigm was attachment, and it's attaching myself to different things. So it's learning how to take a step back and view that battlefield from a distance and see what needs to be done and how effectively you can do these things as well. So that was probably my main 3 paradigms and shift that I had to do.
That's super impressive because I think you summed up the way you highlighted those three paradoxes and paradigms as you had order, you had attachment, those things that like I think they're the things that make life easy. And easy is not always a good thing. Because when it's easy, you're not challenging yourself, you're not pushing yourself out there, you're not trying to be a better person or better yourself or go take an opportunity that you might otherwise say no to. So I think like understanding that, especially for I think a lot of our listeners will be young entrepreneurs as well, and they will probably relate in the sense of making their business lifestyle as like a 9 to 5, and then not providing the time for other things that will actually help them be better people, which makes them therefore a better entrepreneur. So I think that's really powerful. And I think you touched on one thing about religion actually, which is something I wanted to come back to because you mentioned the sins and you mentioned that sort of impact it's had on you. And a lot of entrepreneurs talk about spirituality and particularly ethnic entrepreneurs. There are things that we all do to sustain ourselves and better ourselves. So from a spirituality point of view, a religious point of view, how would you say that's impacted you?
So I was brought up in a very Christian background. It was a very strict Christian. Obviously, I went through a spiritual journey as well. And it was, so I'm going to summarize it very quick. I went from atheist to a big believer in Christ. But I'll explain that later if you would like. But then the main place that spirituality has in my life is God. And it's peace, if that makes sense. Because when you understand that you're not alone in this, so Bob Proctor says this, okay, this is very key to understand when it comes to God as well. So every human being operates on 3 dimensional planes of understanding. It is you're a spiritual being with an intellect and live in a physical body. So it's the mind, body, and spirit. So with that being said, when you understand that God is outside time, space, and matter, he's just an entity, if that makes sense. And even an entity can't even describe what God is. But for me, I perceive God as a loving father that can ask for guidance. But then when you understand and fully trust in God, and when you fully trust in that everything happens for a reason, that's the first thing. And life happens for you and not to you. When you understand those 2 main principles, you start to understand, okay, cool. Everything that bad is happening, every bad that is happening is preparing me from where I want to go. if that makes sense. And actually touches upon a very key thing that I recently learned. And it's one, so I was watching a YouTube video. Okay, this is where intuition comes in. Intuition is God's boy. And it was, I don't normally get like Christian videos on my feed on YouTube. However, it came up. I was like, okay. And I instantly went to the third one, excluding all the other ones. And it was exactly what I was going through in that moment. And it's called a test of discouragement. Very key. Because when you set a goal for something, the universe or God wants to see how serious are you for what you want. So you're going to go through a period of tests throughout your business life. For example, what I was going through then, it was lack of finances, plus all my friends were leaving. It was a massive, I was like, whoa, what's happening? And when I understood later, it was just a test for me to understand and grow and become the person I needed to be in order for that to, in order for me to gain the wealth that I should be gaining, and in order for me to get the goal I wanted to get to, you have to go through a test. Because when you understand life is not just a smooth upward trend, it up and it's down, and then when it's down, and when you understand those things, it's normal and it's a natural bit of life. And one thing I learned, or not a cope, but one thing I learned, for example, a way to look at it as if life is not so serious. Okay, my birthday is in August. Let's just say I have a deadline to make at the end of this month. It's not a big deal. My birthday is still coming closer. The deadline is still going to come closer. It doesn't matter, if that makes sense. Because everything is meant to happen for a reason, and everything will happen accordingly. So when you have that mind at ease of everything is meant to happen for a reason, and God is there, God is providing you and protecting you from things that you don't see, then that gives you a sense of relaxation. Not comfortability. Don't this was my problem. It was relaxation and comfortability that I made the mistake between the two. There's a difference. Relaxation is working when you know that nothing can harm you. Comfortability is when you're like, you know what, I'm gonna take a day off. It's everything is meant to happen in its own set, but no. God has given you the tools in order to be able to get the life that you want. It's now time for you to work, but work accordingly with God, if that makes sense. So that's how spirituality plays with me.
That's really powerful. I think when you were speaking about that video that came up on your feed and it being intuition, and it's like God's message to you to say, watch this video and listen to everything in it and take action. That's really powerful, because that's exactly what I think, bringing it back to our theme of being from an ethnic minority and trying to be an entrepreneur. I think those are the things, the little things that happen that if actually they ground you, they make you realize, look, if you're going to do this, you got to do things the hard way, but you got to put in the effort. You got to look after your body. Your body is a temple in all aspects, like you mentioned, in spiritual, your mind, your body, your physical state. So it is really powerful. And I think that leads me to my next question, which is about something you touched on earlier, which was your purpose. And again, I'm gonna frame it in the sort of the ethnic lens of it, like your purpose from your story, your upbringing, your religion, your culture. But also, because the biggest thing I think I've gotten from speaking to you today, Gleston, is the mindset that underpins all of that. So how would you define your purpose, and how would you say your purpose has been influenced by everything we've discussed today?
A very good question. So my purpose is to show people the way to freedom on a physical level, mindset level, spiritual level, and a financial level. So that's in a nutshell. And when I look at that, actually, it was to be able to show people freedom, because we're both very young. That's the first thing. We're both incredibly young for people who are starting out an entrepreneurial life. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we come from an ethnic minority, which means that the stereotype of Asians and Indians that go through this whole situation is become a doctor, become a lawyer, become a banker. So it's, for me, yes, it's to show people freedom, but what's the statement I'm making is to show that anyone can do anything. And it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what beliefs you're instilled at birth, because you have the power to create your economy. You have the power to change your mindset. Because when you understand the mindset is the gateway to your own economy and you can change that, you're able to change everything about your life, if that makes sense. And so my main thing on an ethnic minority standpoint is to show people that the tradition doesn't work anymore. The tradition was there to keep survival 100 years ago, but it's not there anymore. The economy that we live in today is not the society that used to be. So on an ethnic minority background, I want to show people, especially Indians and people who have the paradigm of go into education, go into school, go get a job. Because ultimately, and I'll tell you why this happens as well. It's for me, it's to show people how to do it. But then this is the reasoning behind it and why people do what they do. It's the understanding that the condition that they get instilled at birth, they think they're growing. And if I was to ask someone what their purpose is, I asked someone yesterday, like, what's a purpose? And because they keep mentioning gold. Like, for example, I thought my purpose was to retire my parents when I first started business. But no, that was a goal. And so my purpose is the reason why you're on this earth. And that's what a purpose is. And people think they go through life, and this is why, because all your behavioral habits on a psychological level, all the behavioral habits are within the subconscious mind. The results that you get are all because of your subconscious mind. However, education, what does it do? It gives you study, it gives you knowledge, it gives you advice and information. Amazing, you need that. However, it doesn't influence the subconscious mind. It influences the conscious mind. And that's what we call the educated mind, of the part of the brain or the part of the mind that takes in the information. Sorry, not part of the brain. The mind is not the brain. Apologies. So the mind is the whole body. The whole body. So people think when they think of the mind, they think of the brain. But it's not. That's one thing. But it's because they go through this whole conditioning of education is the key. They learn that they think that education is key, then they go into a job thinking that's what they want. But Bob Proctor asked his children, they still went through education. He asked, don't ask if you're going to go to education, ask where they're going to go in education. That's what you should ask yourself, if that makes sense.
That's actually I think that was a beautiful answer, to be honest, because you touched on everything, you spoke about the mind, and I think that's exactly what I think all human beings need to be doing in terms of defining their purpose and defining their why yeah, exactly. Why are you on planet Earth? Why are we all on planet Earth? There is a higher reason other than a job, other than going to work. There is way more to life than that. And I think that is something. And if you look at it from the entrepreneurial point of view, everyone has their business purpose. Everyone has their goals in financial terms. But what is your purpose as a human being? I think is the thing that I think you really you stood out there in that answer. I did say penultimate question, but I do have another question. And then so this is
Go
actually
ahead.
the penultimate question. And it's really interesting because I was speaking to Linda Attram, who was the first guest of the Ethnically podcast. And I'm doing a thing where I ask each guest before they finish to give me a question to ask the next guest. So Gleston, you have a question from Linda. And this question was really powerful because when I spoke to Linda, we spoke about female empowerment and women, and she told me all about the stories of how she wants to inspire women across the world to do better, to be better in business, to lead by example. And her question, she said, if my next guest is a man, and I said, yes, Gleston will be on the podcast next, what advice would you give to young men to ensure that they are empowering women?
Very, very good question. I would say the main thing for women right now, they need a voice. That makes sense. And the main way for men to empower women, it's the first thing is to understand that we are different, but we have different roles and different attributes of life. For example, women have incredible intuition. I can't even describe how great women's intuition is. It's the most powerful thing on this earth. Honestly, in my opinion, that's probably the most powerful thing on the earth. For example, you probably know about this. Has a girl ever been just so right, and you think completely differently, but your girl's completely right, and you're like, have to give it to her. That everything that I was doing, that's what my ex girlfriend said. This is not right. This, that I'm like, but I'm a bit stubborn. But to go back to your question, is to understand that women have incredible higher faculties, incredible intuition. And it's to be able to make any person feel worthy. You need to show them their strength. You need to put them in a situation where their strength is, if that makes sense. You have to play to their strengths. So one thing I would tell men to help them empower women is analyze what the strengths of women are. Find out what their true desire, find out what their true strength is. And with that being said, give them a position where they're going to thrive in a situation. Because this is my reality as well. I want everyone to do what they desire to do, if that makes sense. What their purpose desires, what God wants them to do. That's what I truly want for people, man or woman. So, some advice to anyone: find out what someone's purpose is and put them in a position where they're going to thrive in that. Because my idealistic world is for everyone to do what they truly want to do. Because when people do what they truly love, it doesn't feel like work. For example, I help people on an individual level. I impact lives, if that makes sense. I'm starting to change companies. I'm starting to build companies in their sales and all other aspects of them. And it's life changing. And that's what I love to do. It doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense. I can work 18 hours a day, but you can say work 18 hours a day, but it doesn't feel like work. And that's why that's the main thing. So for women, they are incredible beings. And it's to understand that, yes, they are different, but then where are their main strengths and play to their strengths, if that makes sense. That's what I would say.
That's brilliant. No, I think it's a really nice sort of lasting message to send. And I think just to add on to that, I think it's really powerful. You said recognize their strengths and put them in an environment where they can thrive. And it just made me realize a brilliant quote from Mirella Sula, founder of Global Women. And she said, the best way to empower women is to give them a microphone. So I think that's like a perfect sort of way to sort of end that our conversation. And I think as the final question, because you got given a question to answer, my
Yeah.
final question to you is, what would you like me to ask the next person on the Ethnically podcast?
That's a very good question. And put me on the spot with that one. Because there's so many questions out there. Okay. I would say for that person, okay, I love this one because I heard it from someone else. It's how high would you aim if you knew you could not fail? That's
Oh,
what will make you truly understand the type of person that you're on the podcast with.
that is
Yeah.
that is. Can you? So, how high would you aim if you knew you couldn't fail? That's a brilliant question. Okay, that's a perfect question. Actually, I think that's. I know I've only had 2 episodes. That might be. Linda's question, so I can't really say that. But no, that's an amazing question. I will be asking the next guest of the Ethnically podcast that question.
Amazing.
And so that brings us
Amazing.
to the end of our conversation today, Gleston. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think you've
Likewise.
been your authentic, brilliant self, and I personally can see why you've been so successful at such a young age, and I'm sure you're going to continue thriving and inspiring people along the way.
Thank you, man.
So a big,
Yeah.
massive thank you to you, Gleston.
Thank you,
Yeah,
man.
amazing stuff.
Pleasure. Well, I mean, thanks for bringing me on this podcast and giving me a voice as well, because now in this day and era, podcasts are the way to go if you want to, how do you say it? What's the word? It's the way to bring forth your message, if that makes sense. I'm very happy and I'm very grateful to you for allowing me on this podcast. And I know your podcast is going to be a killer. There's a wait on what. So to the viewers, start following this man. There's a lot of guests coming along that you're going to love to watch, 100%. So you got a very good head on your shoulders, man. Definitely. I know you're going to go far as well, intuitively. Something.